Overnight, in the early hours of the morning in Israel, Hezbollah fired a missile at Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is the commercial capital of Israel. It's big, it's dense, it's full of high-tech companies, millions of people, and Hezbollah tried to put a ballistic missile into the middle of it. David's sling intercepted that missile and destroyed it before it hit Tel Aviv, but I expect the Israelis will respond in kind. Now, I was up late last night because Dan Senor dropped a special edition of his podcast, Call Me Back, with Nadav Eyal, a center-left journalist from Israel who is nevertheless very well connected with the Israeli defense establishment, security establishment. And I want to play for you just a few minutes of what prompted Hezbollah's, I think, act of desperation in firing a ballistic missile at Tel Aviv. Listen to this exchange, cut number 58.
And there are a lot of civilian towns, populations within the Upper Galilee.
Of course. So you have in the Upper Galilee, it's Kiryat Shmona. In the Western Galilee, it's Nahariya. And in between, you have places like Shlomi. You have all of the kibbutzim that were built there, really from the inception of Zionism, to make sure that this area is controlled by the state to be. So the strategic element of Hezbollah managing or planning to invade the Galilee was reduced or maybe erased by the IDF in the first year of the war. And then they had another strategic ability, much more important, and that is to shoot thousands or dozens of thousands of rockets and missiles, mostly short range, but also long range and very sophisticated guided missiles and rockets into Israel. And this ability by Hezbollah was also assisted by Iran. This was really not only the strategic leverage of Hezbollah, this was the strategic leverage of the regime in Tehran that Hezbollah has been building for the last 20, 25 years. And what happened in the last 48 hours is that the Israeli Air Force managed to hit, I don't want to say 50%, although some Israeli sources are telling me even just minutes before our conversation now that it's about 50% of the ability of Hezbollah to shoot rockets at Israel. And they did this in one morning. And they have other targets that they didn't hit yet. So they have substantially delimited Hezbollah's ability to strike us with both sophisticated guided rockets and also short-range ones. The number that was sometimes used was 140,000 of these either short-range, mid-range, or long-range missiles and rockets.
Meaning 140,000 is what they had stockpiled ready to go.
Before the war.
Before the war, yeah.
Now, this is really misleading because most of these are really short range. And when I say short range, I mean between 1 kilometer and 4 kilometers. So this is like less than 3 miles. And you don't go to war with Israel when you have that. And most of these elements of short range weren't hit. It's the important stuff like mid-range, 50 kilometers, long range, 200 kilometers. These things were hit. Now, after I'm saying this, it was a huge success by the IDF. I should also say that Hezbollah still retains an ability to hit Tel Aviv, to hit even southern Tel Aviv. And one of the things that were exposed in the last 72 hours is that they do have a modest version of cruise missiles, which wasn't exposed until now. And the IDF spokesperson, Daniel Agari, exposed this. And you can see this video if someone wants to Google this. You can actually see a house with a huge cruise missile inside. It's a Soviet version of a cruise missile. And the video actually shows how they drop the wall of the house, which was probably made to be seen as a wall. They drop it to the ground. Then you see the missiles. Then you see the IDF drone or missile hit that cruise missile. Now, the bottom line for the IDF right now, I've spoken with an IDF official yesterday. I've spoken with senior security officials in Israel, the best you can get on these issues. And they were, I don't want to say overjoyed, but they were very content with the results. They were saying this is much more than their optimistic estimate as to what was hit. They were saying that Hezbollah has been surprised again after the pager operation, and they were saying that they are continuing as planned and they will escalate.
They will escalate. What Nadav went on to say is that in 6 hours, Israel had done more damage to Hezbollah than it did in the 34 days of war that Israel waged against Hezbollah in 2006. In 6 hours, the Israeli Air Force took out more of Hezbollah than Hezbollah lost in 2006. I don't want to play the entire podcast. It's a long podcast. I would encourage you to listen to it for the up-to-date status on Operation Northern Arrows. We do not know, nobody knows, whether or not a ground invasion is coming. There are reports that Prime Minister Netanyahu is opposed to it. There are reports as well that he is canceling his trip to the United Nations General Assembly. What I want you to understand is that Hezbollah, a week ago, had no idea that they were in for the worst week of their terrorist organization's existence. It's really just the Iranian Forward Deployed Division, and the Iranian Forward Deployed Division is in tatters. I don't even know who Nasrallah has left to call. The head of the missile force was killed yesterday in a strike in Beirut, different from the strikes on the missiles, the rockets, and the cruise missiles, and the drone production and storage facilities. Completely different. Massive strategic victory by Israel in the last 48 hours. And what did Hezbollah do? They sent a ballistic missile at Tel Aviv overnight. So I think we're going to get round 3. Pagers and walkie-talkies round 1. Round 2, the bombardment of 6 hours 2 days ago. Round 3 is going to come up today. Don't mess with Israel. And Hezbollah has learned. Hamas is destroyed. They still have hostages. Sinwar may or may not be dead. They still have some tunnels, but it's a methodical mop-up operation in Gaza now and rebuilding. The only question for the world, because the world passed a United Nations Security Resolution in 2006. It's United Nations Security Resolution 1701, which ended the last Iran-Hezbollah war, really an Iran-Israel war, with the demand of the world that Hezbollah withdraw behind the Litani River and demilitarize that 12-mile zone. Hezbollah has never complied. So there's no need for a new Security Council resolution. None whatsoever. Everyone knows the bad guys, the evil people, are in Tehran, and they are in the southern suburbs of Beirut, where Hezbollah is headquartered, and they are south of the Litani River, and they are in the tunnels of Gaza. They are in the Houthi villages. They're all Iranian proxies. It's all Israel versus Iran. And you know what? Iran has never fought a war where it did not enjoy at least air parity. The Iran-Iraq War of the 80s was really a ground war, and no one had air superiority. The IAF just showed them what happens when there's air superiority in a war, particularly with F-35s. They have no idea what hit them, and then the dummies, the fools, the evil ones, launch a ballistic missile at Tel Aviv overnight. Watch that space. One other thing I want to tell you, we got a great show coming up. Senator Ted Cruz is joining me today. Vivek Ramaswamy will be along today. You may want to join the universe just to be able to listen to the entire show commercial free, and much of it will be on the podcast, Highly Concentrated Hugh, later today. But I do want to tell you we've got Matt Continenti coming up and Mary Catherine Hamp, many people coming up to discuss. But we had 4 polls come out yesterday. CNN says on a national basis among likely voters, Kamala Harris is up 1 point. Quinnipiac came out on a national basis among likely voters. It's tied. Reuters says Harris is up by 6. They only talked to 785 likely voters nationally. Who knows what that is? And CBS says Harris is up 4. None of these numbers give Harris any kind of comfort. And I'll talk with Matt Continenti about this. I think she's losing. I think she knows she's losing. I think Trump is winning. Trump was in Georgia yesterday in Savannah, making sure he is, in fact, as strong as the battleground state polling shows. He'll go to North Carolina as well. It's Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Nevada. 7 battle states. The state 8 is either Virginia or New Hampshire. I'm not sure. Doesn't really matter. If Donald Trump wins those 7, or 5 of those 7, he returns to the White House. And Kamala Harris is dropping because she does not have 2 coherent sentences to string together. Why did she turn down the invitation to the Al Smith dinner? I have an answer for that. Donald Trump was in Savannah, Georgia yesterday, delivering a tough message on the border. I think Kamala Harris is going to the border today. She'll be jeered if she lets anyone near her because of the 10 million to 15 million illegal immigrants who have crossed over the border under her tenure as border czar. Cut number 36.
Kamala's illegals are also crushing your wages and stealing your jobs. Last month alone, think of this, American-born workers lost 1.3 million jobs and migrants gained 635,000 jobs. So we're putting our migrants to work at a much higher level than our own people, our own citizens. So as we create millions of new manufacturers...
This is not Donald Trump making things up. The head of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, said the same thing last week in cutting interest rates 0.5%. Let's go down to cut number 48. Again, Donald Trump on Kamala Harris.
But she's trying to con the public that she did a good job at the border. She's actually saying, no, I did a good job at the border. Remember, when she says we're working on the border, she still has airplanes flying in loaded up with migrants over the border. She thought she wouldn't get caught. It took him about 2 years to figure that one out. It was a little strange. Brand new, beautiful, large Boeing jets are landing in airports all over our country, and migrants are getting out. It took a little while to figure that one out. So it
takes no time at all to figure it out. It just is they did not want the pictures of migrants coming across the border. And it was a secret program. It was exposed by the news media. Kamala Harris, border czar. Now, the word border czar wasn't used. What President Biden said is, you are charged with stemming the flow across the border and addressing the root causes of migration from the Central American countries. She did neither. She failed spectacularly at both. Let's go to cut number 44.
And under my plan, American workers will no longer be worried about losing your jobs to foreign nations. Instead, foreign nations will be worried about losing their jobs to America.
Bravo, that is what it should be. Cut number 49, one more Donald Trump cut from Savannah yesterday.
Even whatever she's going to do, she wants to do it. She's going to, she's going to the border very soon. She hasn't been there for 4 years. The border czar. I'm not the border czar. Oh, for years she was the border czar. Right now she's saying because it's the worst border in history, but she's going to the border. It's very interesting. But you know what I ask? Well, even her policies now, they're crazy. They're crazy. They'll destroy country. But why didn't they do it 3.5 years ago? Now she's saying...
Yeah, and then Kamala Harris phoned one in to NPR in Wisconsin. I'm going to talk about this with Matt Continetti coming up after the break. When you call into NPR in Wisconsin, you are really afraid of talking to people. Cut number 50, Kamala Harris on Wisconsin NPR.
I think we should eliminate the filibuster for Roe, and we need and get us to the point where 51 votes would be what we need to actually put back in law the protections for reproductive freedom.
Okay, she wants to end the filibuster. The filibuster also means not only passing an abortion law, which is not going to pass, it's never going to pass. They're never going to get 51 people for the unlimited abortion law that Kamala Harris wants. They cannot get 51 votes right now to expand the Supreme Court and pack it. FDR tried that in 1938. I think it will fail again. Cut number 51, her housing plan.
The second is to cut through the red tape that currently, it exists from local, state, and federal levels, and really cutting through the red tape so that we don't unnecessarily burden the ability to actually create this additional housing that brings down the cost of...
All I can tell you is this is a joke coming from a former Attorney General of California, which works through the California Air Resources Board, through the California Department of Fish and Game, through the Regional Water Quality Control Boards, along with the EPA, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Army Corps of Engineers, to make building housing in California nearly impossible. It's nuts for her to talk this way. But That's what she wants to talk about. Matt Continetti is a fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, a contributing columnist to the Washington Free Beacon and commentary, and in my ear most mornings when he's on the commentary podcast. Good Wednesday morning to you, Matt. Good to have you back.
Thank you, Hugh. Good morning to you.
I want to begin with Dan Senor, who is frequently a guest on your podcast with the Commentary Gang. Dan dropped a podcast last night with Nadav Eyal. I don't know if you've had a chance to hear it. I played the key portion for the audience just now. In 6 hours, Israel did more damage to Hezbollah than they did in the 34 days of war in 2006. Are you surprised by the precision and the devastation wrought by the Israeli Air Force?
I don't think the capabilities or skill of the Israeli Air Force surprise me. I'm more surprised at the international reaction to Israel's self-defense. Just to take a step back, Hugh, Hezbollah, which is a terrorist army that occupies and controls Lebanon, a sovereign country, has been firing rockets into Israel since October 8th, 2023. There was no occupation of Lebanon. Israel left Lebanon almost 25 years ago. The Hezbollah has nothing to do with the Palestinians. They're a Shiite militia that's armed by Iran, like Hamas. But they've been firing indiscriminately on Israel. And yet when Israel takes steps, remarkable steps, including the pager plot last week, then this air campaign beginning this week to defend itself, the international community, including the United States, comes down on Israel. I think this has it entirely backward. Where is the pressure on Hezbollah? Where is the pressure on Iran? That's what I want to see.
I want to know where Kamala Harris is, because in 2006, the United Nations passed a Security Council Resolution 1701, which called on Hezbollah to withdraw behind the Litani River. They have not done so. The international body should be demanding that its UN resolutions be complied with, not giving speeches at the General Assembly. But I do wonder what you think Israel will do now, because overnight, after that devastation, Hezbollah, sort of the forward division operating force of Iran, launched a ballistic missile at Tel Aviv. What would we do if anyone launched a missile at New York? Because Tel Aviv is Israel's New York.
Well, we would retaliate strongly. The Iron Dome protects Israel from most ballistic missiles, but the Iron Dome is not foolproof. I think Israel has to figure out a way to end these attacks, and that may mean some type of ground incursion into Lebanon to push Hezbollah back beyond the Litani River. One of the consequences of that indiscriminate missile and rocket firing that's been going on for almost a year now is that there are tens of thousands of Israelis who have had to evacuate their homes in the northern part of Israel, now entering a second school year for the children, not being able to attend school in the communities where they have grown up, people having to find new economic situations. This is not a sustainable situation. And for much of the past year, Israel has been focused on Hamas and Gaza. Now we're at a situation where the IDF has, I think, security control or something close to it over Gaza. And it's really just a question of methodically going through the tunnels and attacking and destroying Hamas assets as they are encountered. So Israel can now focus on the threat from the north. So I do think that Hezbollah could end this situation by stopping its attacks on Israel and complying with UN resolutions. And the fact that it isn't may be forcing Israel to take more drastic action.
Well, I think that drastic action, I want your reaction to this, Matt Continetti, is to strike at Iran, to hit Cargill and their export facilities. Very few civilians would be involved in that attack. Hit the Quds Force, hit the head of the IRGC. Iran has never been in a battle where they lacked air superiority, except Operation Praying Mantis in 1988 when Reagan sunk a great deal of the Iranian Navy. It is time to go for the head of the snake. And I think if they do that, if they just simply say, no more messing with your proxies. If the Houthis hit us in Tel Aviv, if Hezbollah aims at Tel Aviv, we are hitting Iran because you supply it all. Why keep up the fiction? Matt, we didn't. World War II, we hit Tokyo with Jimmy Doolittle early on. We didn't go to Guadalcanal first. Right. What do you think?
Well, this This is the strategy that the former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett has been advocating. You go at the head of the octopus, not the various tentacles. I think Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Security Cabinet have a different view. They think that by taking off the tentacles one by one, you're weakening the head of the octopus. And so if you degrade Hezbollah, then that may make it easier down the road to confront Iran and its nuclear program. I think the missing element here is the United States. Israel and the United States together could end this war overnight by pursuing the course you suggest, Hugh, by taking the fight to Iran. And we have every reason to do so. I mean, just yesterday, Donald Trump was briefed on the multiple assassination attempts against him, the many multiple assassination plots that are being organized against him, all of them having ties to Iran. So you have this theocratic government, the world's largest source of terrorism. It's behind Hamas. It's behind Hezbollah. It's killed Americans. It's trying to kill a former president and potential future president of the United States. And where is the pressure? We're allowing the Iranians to come into New York City and attend the UN General Assembly. It's absolutely outrageous.
I would never say this. I thought Bill Clinton is doing a far better job deterring Iran than Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, because he struck at Saddam Hussein when Saddam Hussein threatened former President George H.W. Bush. Matt, I want to turn to domestic politics. Kamala Harris called a phoner in to Wisconsin NPR yesterday. That is about as safe a place as anyone can go as to Wisconsin NPR. She's not going to the Alfred Smith dinner. You talked about this yesterday. I think you may have overlooked one aspect of that. She doesn't want to be next to Cardinal Dolan, because the left wing of the Democratic Party really hates the Catholic Church because it is doctrinally opposed to almost every tenet of the left. Do you think she's making a statement, or is it just she's afraid of not being able to deliver lines?
No, I think in the case of the Al Smith dinner, there is something about the Democrats' approach to the Catholic votes and to the Catholic Church that we've seen in recent years. Let's not forget that while she was senator, Kamala Harris objected to one of Trump's judicial nominees because of his membership in the Knights of Columbus, which, I mean, it's about as inoffensive as you can get. The Knights of Columbus is a charitable organization, volunteer organization for Catholic men. Remember, too, the late Dianne Feinstein telling Amy Coney Barrett at one of her nomination hearings that, you know, the dogma lives within you, because Justice Barrett
deeply
is
within
a
you,
committed Catholic. The dogma lives within you. So there's definitely kind of a superciliousness or a kind of a skepticism bordering on prejudice that many social progressives feel toward committed Catholics. And so I could see why that might present a political problem for Harris as she's invited to this dinner. Of course, the last Democratic nominee not to go was Walter Mondale in 1984. And as Cardinal Dolan pointed out, look what happened to him.
Yeah, he did. I used to say until 10-7 that the last acceptable prejudice in America was to be anti-Catholic. It is obviously now acceptable in many cities and on many campuses to be anti-Semitic, and to do so quite brazenly, and you cover that well on commentary. I want to turn to the polls before I lose you, Matt. Yesterday we had 4. CNN national poll of 2,074 likely voters, Harris +1. Quinnipiac national poll of 1,728 likely voters, tied. But Reuters Ipsos, a likely voter poll of 785, Harris +6. I throw out the outliers. I think it's tied nationally, and I think that's very good news for Donald Trump, especially when we realize state polling is hard to do. The Wisconsin poll that sticks in my head was the poll done by ABC Washington Post, and I work for the Post as a columnist. Do not like to criticize them, but facts are facts. A week before the election, Post ABC said Wisconsin would go for Joe Biden by 17 points. Wisconsin went for Joe Biden by 0.63 points. Obviously, pollsters don't know how to do this anymore. Why are we still reading them, Matt?
Well, I guess we need something to do, but you're absolutely right, Hugh. The pollsters missed the Trump vote in 2016. They missed it again in 2020. if they miss it in 2024, anything like they did in 2016 or 2020, the fact is that Donald Trump is ahead of Kamala Harris right now and would win every swing state if the election were held today. So take that, with a grain of salt. This is a very close election. It's the closest election in 60 years, the closest election in my lifetime. And the question is why? Well, I think we know Donald Trump. He is who he is. You either love him or you hate him. You support him or you don't. People don't know Kamala Harris. They're not sold on her. There's something about her that voters find elusive. And every time she tries to put meat on the bone of her candidacy, she comes across as a progressive who is to the left of this country and not up to the job of being the president of the United States. So this is a dilemma for her. I think the only way out of it is to convince the American people that she truly would be different from Joe Biden, substantially different. And that's something that she just cannot do.
Matt, do you think the Oprah sit down did her good or did her harm?
I think it may have done her slight harm. I mean, as Trump pointed out in a recent rally, just watching the expressions on Oprah's face was kind of amusing because I don't think Oprah really expected Harris to be not that good a performer, as was revealed during the telethon. But the thing about it, Hugh, is this. Harris has benefited from an extraordinarily favorable press since becoming the nominee. She had a successful convention. She had a good debate against Donald Trump. She won the debate. She had the Oprah sit down, and yet the race is still tied. And what that says to me is that there's a real reluctance among many voters, independent voters in particular, to embrace Kamala Harris. Why? Well, one reason is kind of the missing elements of her candidacy I just mentioned. But another element is this is still the Biden economy. This is still the Biden border. This is still the Biden global chaos. And Harris is a part of it. People understand that.
Matt, I've been in broadcasting in Minnesota since 2000 on AM 1280 The Patriot. I've been to the Minnesota State Fair a dozen times to do that. Tim Walz is very Minnesota. Think of your very favorite uncle. And if you don't have one, then your very favorite friend of your dad. That's Tim Walz. He's very good at this. J.D. Vance is a Yale lawyer, and he's very good on his feet. But Margaret Brennan and Nora O'Donnell are going to be, it's 3 against 1 again. You guys seemed pretty optimistic yesterday talking about this debate. I am not at all, because I think Tim Walz is like attacking grandpa. Do you think J.D. Vance can work around that?
I do. I mean, my favorite uncle hasn't been to China 30 times and hasn't, mandated ethnic studies in the public schools in Minnesota. And he hasn't said in public on video that every time he realizes that Ilhan Omar is in Congress, he smiles. So I think he's a little bit different than my favorite uncle, a lot different, actually. I do agree with you, Hugh, that it's going to be 3-on-1. And how they're going to come after J.D. Vance. They're going to talk about the Haitian immigrants in Springfield and the line that Donald Trump used about eating pets, cats, and dogs. They're going to talk about the childless cat ladies. Somehow cats have become the pet of the election. And they're going to talk about Project 2025 and whether J.D. Vance is too extreme, right? So if I know that, then J.D. Vance knows that. And I think that he's pretty smart on his feet. And he's doing a lot more preparation than President Trump does for these debates. So I think, look, it's not going to be a guaranteed Vance victory. I didn't want to suggest that on the podcast for commentary, but I do think it's going to be an interesting fight between two politicians with two very different styles.
I think JD is going to ignore whatever Walz says and go right at Kamala Harris again and again and again and again and again and again. You don't matter, Tim. Let's talk about the border. You don't matter, Tim. Let's talk about Bidenomics. You don't matter, Tim. Let's talk about the ACLU questionnaire. But I don't think Tim Walz is a knockover. Let me close by asking about the publication date of The Good and the Bad. the forthcoming book by Matt Continetti, which is getting a lot of press on the Commentary podcast. Do you enjoy doing that? 2 days ago, you guys didn't drop it till 2:00 in the afternoon. I was mad at you. You need a regular schedule. It needs to drop at 9:30 so I can listen to it.
We have changed our distribution mechanism, Hugh. So we're working on it and getting it to you. It's like dealing with the U.S. Postal Service. Sometimes there's the delay between recording the podcast and getting it to the audience. We do enjoy doing it. And yes, my tome, The Right and the Wrong, is what I'm working on, because I've noticed that it's very easy to set yourself up as an intellectual authority. All you need to do is write a book about a subject, and apparently you're the expert. So my tome is going to be Right and Wrong. It's going to have all the answers, and it's coming soon to a bookstore near you.
Thank you. And followed quickly by Abe Greenwald. It's worse than that. Thank you very much, Matt Continetti. I'll be listening today on the Commentary Pod. Thank you. Mary Catherine Ham joins me, host of Getting Hammered, which she co-hosts with Vic Mattis, and a brand new podcast. Now another one from my library. What is going to drop now in addition to Getting Hammered, Mary Catherine?
It's called Normally. It's I'm hosting it with Carol Markowitz, a New York Post columnist. I'm sure who you guys know. We are both normie adjacent moms. We pay a lot of attention to the news, but we also, buy groceries and drive our kids around to stuff and care about normal people things, and tried to get schools open back in 2020. So we're going to do a little bit of parenting, a little bit of news. It's sort of a normie takes for people who are sick of the news being so weird.
I look forward to Normie because I talk to my daughter all the time, who is about your age and has 4 children. I want her to come on. She's reluctant to do father-daughter on the air because we raise children differently. But we'll see. If Normie works, then is that the title, Normie?
Normally with Carol and MK.
Normally. I will be loading it up. Now, Mary Catherine, I have a serious question before we get to some fun stuff. Mm-hmm. In the last many years, North Carolina has produced John Edwards, cheater, bad man; Cal Cunningham, cheater, bad man; Mark Robinson, cheater, at least virtually, and bad guy. Are there no opposition research firms in North Carolina?
I feel like there should be. I am not super in touch with North Carolina politics anymore. There isn't a good investigative newspaper at the think tank, the Carolina Journal, that has at times taken down governors. So perhaps it needs to turn its sights to things like this. I will say, just to brag on myself for a moment, that my first ever vote as an 18-year-old American was not for John Edwards. It was for Locke Faircloth, because Edwards gave me the creeps, and I thought that he was just a little too skeezy for me.
Well, you were right. You had that antenna. Yeah. The spidey sense was tingling. Now, Mary Catherine, the swing states include North Carolina. I refuse to believe that, but you know North Carolina better than I do. My in-laws, my son's in-laws live down there in Winston-Salem. Russ and Aaron, good morning. I'm just wondering whether or not you think North Carolina really is in play.
So the Mark Robinson news worries me with reverse coattails. It does. And I'm probably oversampling for blue North Carolina because I'm from one of the bluest parts of North Carolina. So I get a little more worried, I think, than other people do. So just take it with a grain of salt. So I am a little worried. I also would say, in my sort of sampling, my Facebook sampling in 2016, that told me that my working and middle class African-American friends from home weren't excited about Hillary, and I should have taken that as a sign. I'm not seeing a lot of enthusiasm again for the Democratic ticket in that demographic, which interests me. There is interest in other demographics, but not that one. So I don't know if they're getting what they need from Kamala.
All right, now I'm going to put aside my buffet hatred and skip. I haven't listened to the new episode of Getting Hammered. It just dropped an hour ago, so I can't bring up. However, do you take the children to buffets? Because if you do, I'm going to have to call social services.
Sure, I take the children to buffets. That's a great deal, Hugh. Have you seen inflation? We got to do all you can eat if we can do all you can eat. No, I would not say we do it often. I like to go to Waffle House, and that's cooked to order.
Oh, Waffle House is fine. They make the food in front of you. You can see it. I got no problem with Waffle House. I talked about this with Vic Mattis. I am buffet-ophobic. And because I don't know how long the food's been there, and the Swedish buffets really creep me out. And you guys talked about that. Let me go back to a serious topic. Kamala Harris has not had a serious interview, not one, not any, zero. She called into Wisconsin NPR yesterday. I refuse to believe America will vote for a candidate who is afraid of a serious interview. What do you think?
I think there's some evidence in polling that that might be the case. The independent voters, people who are persuadable, keep saying, we don't know enough about her. And she refuses to tell them anything. I mean, that Oprah sit down should have been knocked out of the park and was absolutely painful to watch. She just, and I'm not trying to be petty about it. She just is a person who's been public speaking for 20, 25 years and is more terrible at it than most people I've ever seen attempt it. It's a very strange thing. I think the Al Smith dinner and turning that down, the first time since 1984 that anyone has turned it down, shows that she's unwilling even to put herself out there with professional joke writers in a room that would be warm to her. There would be no issues with this. I don't think it's not even carried live. It's sort of leaked later, the interactions from this dinner. She's so risk averse. And if you play prevent defense, as we know, sometimes you prevent yourself from winning.
I think there's also a portion of that reluctance to go to New York that is based in her unwillingness to antagonize her far left people who hate the Catholic Church. What I said to Matt Continetti, I'll set it up the same way to you. Imagine your very favorite uncle, an avuncular, wonderful guy. I think
Right.
J.D. Vance risks attacking Grandpa at this debate. What do you think?
Okay, so I think that Walls, the way I put it with him is that he's a confident and affable speaker, and that can take you a long way. He does come off likable to some people. Now, I've dug deeper. I know the truth about some of the things he says, or many of the things he says, which aren't the truth. So I'm sort of weirded out by him, but not everyone is. Their first impression is often quite good. So, yes, I do think you have to be careful not to go at him so hard as to make yourself unlikable. However, I know that the polling doesn't and the favorability doesn't look great for Vance, but when he is speaking in a tough room, when he is taking tough questioning, he is so calm. He's so measured. He has a very light touch most of the time, even with someone like Margaret Brennan, who, if you watch the interview he did with her on the Sunday show, maybe a month ago, she was so tough on him, often so wrong, fact checked him incorrectly. And he just kept his head, kept explaining, and looked informed. And I think that's probably his best hope, is to look like an informed, serious guy who can parry in a kind way.
What do you think about the tactic? No one's asked my opinion from Senator Vance's office, but if I were asked, I would say ignore Governor Walz, ignore Margaret Brennan, ignore Nora O'Donnell. You get about 40 minutes, go right at Kamala Harris and the border, go right at Kamala Harris and Bidenomics, go right at Kamala Harris and her ACLU questionnaire. Ignore everything and just say, look, you three are against me. Same thing happened to President Trump. And so I'm just going to make sure the American people understand how radical Kamala Harris is, and do that again and again and again. Will that be off-putting or would that be effective?
I think he can do it without being off-putting because he's very good at pivoting. He's very good at taking a question, answering it in part, using that question to answer what he wants to answer. So I think he's capable of doing that. I think there is danger in getting bogged down in all of Tim Walz's various lies, getting into a back and forth where you're wrongly fact-checked by these moderators. And even if he has all the facts, which I am confident that he will, you're still losing time, as you note, Hugh, to define Harris, which is what you should be doing.
This is to me the only job of a vice presidential candidate is to attack, and define. And I think it's the last major audience we will have. Oprah was the penultimate. This is the last major audience we will have. And so it's up to the senator. I think he's very skilled. That's my last question. Unlike Donald Trump, he's not going to get mad. The former president mirrors whoever he is dealing with. That I've done it 24 times now. If you're tough with him, he gets tough with you. If you're nice with him, he's nice with you. JD will not mirror Brennan and O'Donnell. He'll ignore them, I think. Last word to you, Mary Catherine. Expectations. Where's the bar set for Tuesday night?
I'm glad just to see two people who are capable of talking argue with each other. I think both of them are decent talkers, so this will be interesting. I think that my expectations, I think, are higher for Vance than other people's. I think he's underrated as a communicator and has done quite well in these Sunday show interviews that have been incredibly hostile. Go back and watch the Margaret Brennan one if you want a taste of what this might be like. It's going to be a lot. And I think you're right. Keeping his cool is number one. And I am not worried about him doing that.
Thank you, Mary Catherine. Looking forward to normally a brand new podcast, but I'm still, my meat and grog is going to be getting hammered with Vic Mattis because I'm used to it now. But I will listen to normally to find out what my daughter is thinking. Thank you, Mary Catherine.
Thank you.
Leland Bittert's an old friend. He hosts on Balance on News Nation every night. I stayed up last night to talk with Leland about all that had gone on yesterday. Here is that conversation.
Start tonight with Hugh Hewitt, premier conservative radio host in America. Talked today on his program, Hugh. I thought it was so interesting about America on autopilot. One thing about radio hosts, they have an innate understanding, as you do, of their audience. Is the audience starting to pay attention to just how dangerous the world is?
Certainly our audience that is concerned with Israel, and I do not limit that to Jewish Americans. There are lots of friends of Israel who are not Jewish who view it as our preeminent ally in the world, certainly the equal of any other ally in nuclear power. Those who are concerned with Israel have been paying attention very closely since October 7th. But I'd go back further, Leland. I'd go back to the fall of Afghanistan, followed by the invasion of Ukraine, followed by China threatening Taiwan and the Philippines. Yeah, there are so many headlines that might only be 5 to 10% of Americans who placed it in the top 3 issues, but it's always been a top issue for me and for my audience. And I do think radio audiences tend to dial in more, especially those guys and gals who are driving to the Pentagon early in the morning in the Beltway. And across the United States, folks going to work early tend to be a little bit more serious than those going to work late. That's no hit on you, Leland. You work late, I work early.
Well, I would say I do listen to you in the morning as I head to yoga at 6 o'clock in the morning. It's just not heading to work. So where's the cognitive dissonance? And I don't want to get political here. You are, and that's fine. I'm not. But reasonable people can agree the world was a lot safer place under Donald Trump. You could argue causation or correlation, but the world is now a much more dangerous place after 3.5 years of Joe Biden. What is the disconnect between your listeners, the swing state voters who overwhelmingly trust Donald Trump on foreign policy, and the 741 folks of the blob, plus Dick Cheney, William Cohen, former Secretary of Defense, Mike Lee Smith, United States Navy retired, Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel, a Republican who served in the Obama administration, who are all endorsing Kamala Harris on foreign policy?
I'm glad you asked, Leland. If you add up the number of people who served in a senior national security position under Presidents Trump, Presidents Bush, and the first President Bush, you'd have thousands. So finding 700 to say that they rank as someone like that, I would qualify as executive level too. I did DOJ, I did counterintelligence, I did the White House counsel's office. I would qualify it. I'm supporting Donald Trump, and I know Robert O'Brien and Mike Pompeo and all the guys he had with him. There are a few dissenters. And Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney are dissenters. I respect the former vice president greatly. Don't understand his choice here because it is clear to me Kamala Harris doesn't know a thing about national security affairs. And I'm not talking as a Republican there. I'm talking as someone who follows. You could have nominated Angus King. You could have nominated Chris Coons. You could have nominated any number of Democrats who are serious on national security affairs. And you would have split, not just the blob, but people who are serious about it. But I do know a lot of military people, and I bet that the officer corps goes for Donald Trump overwhelmingly. And the question I bring up often, Leland, we have a recruiting crisis in the country. Only the Marine Corps made its number for the last 2 years. They made their number and they downsized the Corps at the same time. So it's kind of cheating, but they made their number. The Army, the Navy, and the Air Force didn't make their number. The Army missed, I think, by 20%. So who's going to fix that recruitment crisis, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? Who do you think, Leland?
No, look, the numbers speak for themselves. People will sign up for a commander-in-chief that they trust.
Correct.
And the trust clearly goes to Donald Trump on this issue. There's an undercurrent in this, and we talk a lot about the Middle East. It's something you and I care a lot about. The president of Ukraine, President Zelensky, is in town. UN General Assembly. He's going to meet President Biden at the White House. He did something else, though. He was on a campaign stop, essentially. Josh Shapiro, one of Kamala Harris's chief surrogates, at an ammunition plant in Pennsylvania. In an interview with The New Yorker, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky said, "My feeling is that Trump doesn't really know how to stop the war, even if he thinks he might know how." How is it now that using Ukraine for political purposes is okay with the Biden administration and the Harris campaign, but was impeachable when it was Donald Trump?
Well, that doesn't make any sense domestically. I support President Zelensky. I hope the United States continues to send him whatever he needs to push Russia out of Ukraine and get toward a negotiated settlement. I think half the Republican Party believes as I do, and half believe it's a waste of time and that NATO ought to be doing more. It is a division. I think President Zelensky was very ill-advised to get involved in domestic politics. I never get involved in Israeli domestic politics. I don't get involved in Ukrainian domestic politics because they don't know what we know, and I don't know what they're doing in their country. I just know Russia invaded them, and that's a bad thing. The good guys are the Ukrainians. I know that Hamas invaded Israel and that Hezbollah has been sending 8,500 rockets, missiles, and drones into Israel since October 8th. Israel is our ally. The Philippines is our ally. They're being assaulted by China. Taiwan is being threatened on a nearly daily basis. It is objectively the case that the world has grown very dangerous under an infirm President Biden. I want to turn to the General Assembly address today, Leland. There's no good tape because there wasn't a good moment in it. He's weak, he's old, he's infirm. There was not one question asked at the ABC News debate, not one, about China. I'm still kind of stunned by that. Now, I know that ABC is owned by Disney. Disney has 2 theme parks in China, and that they sell a lot of merch in China, and they're a little bit worried about that. But not one question on the world's peer competitor to the United States that is our adversary, not our competitor, not someone we just want to win a few trade deals with or get tariffs on, our enemy, and it didn't come up. It's like not bringing up Japan in a 1940 debate between FDR and Wendell Willkie. It was nuts.
All that said, and I think you make a very important point in terms of the American world, the American voter is not focused on foreign policy. Does that mean you and I aren't going to rate talking about it, or has the American public started to pay attention to this issue before perhaps much of the media has? I
think they have, and I'll tell you why. A lot of people care about Israel. A lot of people care about Israel. Christian, Jews, non-religious people. They know it's a democratic country in a dangerous part of the world. They are horrified by October 7th. They remain horrified by October 7th. I have the Israeli flag behind me in my radio studio for a reason. My audience, which is primarily not Jewish, cares about Israel a great deal. So if it's a toss-up on every other issue and it's only national security, you want your kids to be safe. You want your grandkids to be safe. You want the United States to build more ships, more planes, more bombs, more cyber stuff. And when walkie-talkies start blowing up and pagers start blowing up, you begin to feel insecure. The world is a very insecure place. And moms, remember the soccer moms that became the security moms, that became the abortion rights moms? I think this time around they might be all over the place. And Kamala Harris, God love her. She's a nice person. I don't think she has a thought in her head about national security. And if they had talked about it at all at the debate, she would have fallen through the floor. Someone would have pulled the lever and she would have dropped from sight.
I think that's the definition of the radio show don't tell way of looking at an issue. You said that Joe Biden didn't say anything memorable. I'm going to quibble with you a little bit because it may not have been memorable, but it was scary. This is Joe Biden at the UN earlier. Take a listen.
I truly believe we're at another inflection point in world history. But the choices we make today will determine our future for decades to come.
I'll give you the last 30 seconds.
Inflection point. There's an inflection point every day in history. Today, I want to direct everyone who's watching the Dan Senor's podcast. He interviewed Nadav Ivalde after Operation Northern Arrow. In 6 hours, the Israelis did more damage to Hezbollah than they did in 34 days in 2006. The inflection point is Israel is winning. We ought to allow them to win. Ukraine is winning.
It goes on. Leland had me on for a long time to talk national security. I was glad to do that. Let me check the markets, brought to you by our friends at AmericanFederal.com. Going to buy gold today. Do it from our friends at American Federal. Nick Rovich is going to join me tomorrow. Finally got that set up to talk about why is gold at $2,678 an ounce this morning. That's right, $2,678 an ounce. If you want to sell gold today, you can call Nick Grovich at 800-221-7694. If you want to buy gold today because you think its march is permanent, I don't know. I just know that when I buy gold, I'm going to do it with American Federal, 800-221-7694. One reason, they are trustworthy, they are straightforward, they lay out the terms, they don't take credit cards, they don't take promises, they don't play the float. They sell or buy your gold, and they do it straightforward, fast, efficiently. Call them, 1-800-221-7694, or visit AmericanFederal.com. Hezbollah has resumed bombarding northern Israel. 2 have been seriously wounded this morning. I'm just wondering, I will ask Michael Waltz at the bottom of the hour, whether it's time for Netanyahu to turn the IDF loose on Iran. They have an island called Karg Island. It is an oil export facility. It can be hit without great damage to civilians. You can even drop leaflets beforehand. Iran, the war's got to go to Iran before they stop because Hezbollah is just acting on orders from Iran. I'm going out on the Battleground Talkers Tour. If you enjoyed that conversation with Leland, we do that a lot on the road. Battleground Talkers Tour. You go to the battlegroundtour.com and you'll find out where we will be. Salem talkers like Mike Gallagher and I will be out. I'm beginning in Detroit and hitting some states in the upper Midwest, all swing states, trying my best to do our best in getting out the vote. You can vote today in Virginia. You can vote today in Pennsylvania. I don't know if you can vote in Georgia yet, or North Carolina, Arizona, or Nevada, or Wisconsin, but vote in those 7 states. Donald Trump will be president. Deterrence will be restored. Let me also remind everyone out there that Americans for Prosperity can put you to work beyond voting. AmericansForProsperity.com/org. AmericansForProsperity.org/volunteer. If you want to be in the game, if you want to be actually involved in politics, more than just talking about it with your neighbor and throwing a shoe at the TV, go to AmericansForProsperity.org/volunteer. Very easy to sign up. You don't have to commit for hours and hours. You tell them you got 1 day and the next 30, they'll make use of that. AmericansForProsperity.org/volunteer. Walk a precinct. It's not, and I've been walking precincts since my first precinct walk was in 1974 in Lexington and Concord on behalf of Paul Cronin as a freshman in college. He got blown out by Paul Zongas. It was the Watergate baby year, and Republicans didn't win anywhere. But I learned a lot about on-the-ground operations. Maybe then 1976, I walked around Fall River, Massachusetts for Jerry Ford. That was a forlorn hope, as they say, in the Napoleonic Wars. But AmericansForProsperity.org will put you to work, and you'll learn why. Congressman Michael Waltz, he's a member of the Armed Services Committee and the Intel Committee. Good morning, Congressman. Great to have you as always. I'm going to begin at the end with the SHIPS Act, because I was reading the Navy Times during the break. Turns out that the USNS Bighorn, which is an oiler, hit a reef or something. It's been damaged. We don't have any more. Right. And we got a Lincoln Strike Group in the Gulf, and the oiler is this. Where are the ships?
Well, they're being made in China, 50%, and then the rest are being made in Japan and South Korea. They're no longer made in America, Hugh. We are responsible now, we the United States, for 0.2% of global shipping production, and that's everything. That's cargo ships, tankers, oilers, LNG, you name it. They're no longer made here in the United States, and so that means every one of our ships that we need to make for the Navy is this kind of bespoke, handmade, custom-made, Ferrari instead of cranking out pickup trucks. So the SHIP Act would really revitalize American shipbuilding. We've gone from 300 shipyards to 20. The Chinese last year built 1,500 ships. We built 5. We've got to incentivize investments that would essentially create opportunity zones for shipyards and then do a lot to recruit our mariners. To your point, without that one oiler, the strike group in the Persian Gulf has to go back to port to refuel. Or they have to rely on a commercial ship. That means the entire strike group has to stop dead in the water because only our USNS oilers can refuel while underway. I know a lot about this for an Army guy, Hugh, and
I'm
we've
impressed.
got to start building ships again.
Well, the Ships Act is going to do that. I know you've introduced it. What would it accomplish in the near term, and why? I think Donald Trump ought to be talking about this everywhere because it's real jobs for real Americans that we really, really need for our defense.
That's right. Well, it's going to start a long process, Hugh. We've got to dig out of this hole, and you just got to start one shovel at a time. But it will incentivize both investment, recruiting, the industry in many ways in getting the steel, the aluminum, the yards, the workers. These are your wrench turners, right? Your welders, your fitters, your electricians. And those are Donald Trump's people. He actually did talk about shipbuilding yesterday in his speech in Savannah. If you haven't seen that speech, I think it's one of his best yet this year, and told him so. I think if he repeats that 42 more times, he'll be back in the White House.
Well, now let's turn to the immediate. That's the long term. We need ships, and I congratulate you on the Ships Act. Captain Jerry Hendricks will be very happy about that as well. Let's talk about Iran and Israel. Overnight, after Israel in 6 hours did more damage to Hezbollah than they did in 34 days of war in 2006. Not only buzzkill with the pagers and the walkie-talkies, but they just destroyed half their missile fleet. And Hezbollah fired on Tel Aviv last night, and this morning they've wounded 3 more Israelis with rocket fire. What does Israel do? Do they take the war to Iran, which is Hezbollah is basically a forward operating division? You know that. You're a Green Beret. Is Hezbollah independent of Iran, or do they operate pursuant to Iran's orders?
Oh, Hezbollah doesn't so much fire a shot without Iran's approval. And if Iran gives disapproval, you start imposing costs on Iran directly, as Trump did with Soleimani. And Iran says turn it off, Hezbollah will turn it off. Period. A much more operational control with Hezbollah than Hamas. When it comes to Iran, I think your framework is right, Hugh, and we've been saying this now for literally since October 7th. That until you impose costs on Iran, who's pulling all the strings in the Middle East with the Houthis as well, that this will never stop. Iran doesn't want peace. Iran doesn't want a two-state solution. Iran doesn't care about hostages. But until you impose cost on them, not their proxies, this won't stop. However, I do think Israel has to do more to degrade Hezbollah first because of its displaced population. It's got the equivalent of several million. The amount of Israelis that are displaced out of the north and internal refugees would be as though several million Americans were pushed off of our border. It's unacceptable. And I'll remind everyone, Hezbollah agreed to a demilitarized zone between the Litani River in Lebanon and the Israeli border after the 06 war. The UN's supposed to be enforcing it. And once again, the UN is feckless in that region. So I hope that Israel can push Hezbollah back so that it can get its people back without having to invade. But I know that they have that prospect on the table. The other thing, Hugh, when it comes to striking Iran, Iran will retaliate. And Israel, I do not believe, can operationally defend against the hundreds of missiles of drones without the United States' help and the help of Jordan, Saudi, and others. Only the United States can put together that coalition. So when you start imposing costs on Iran directly, it has to be in partnership with the U.S. We also have to choke off their finances. And this administration just isn't willing to do it. So I think you degrade Hezbollah in the north, continue to, until the election, and hopefully we have a switch and a change in strategy.
It was really remarkable at the ABC. debate, if we want to call it that, Congressman, that not one question was asked about China and not one question was asked about Iran and sanctions. Maybe they'll get asked of J.D. Vance and Mike and Tim Walz. I'm not sure. I want to ask you about two things. First of all, the Iranians are trying to kill Donald Trump, Mike Pompeo, and a bunch of other people. I think the Bureau has alerted everyone, but have they alerted Congress to the ongoing threat from the Iranians against the former president?
They owe us some additional briefings, and we are working with them to get that. But I can tell you, the plots from Iran to kill President Trump are very serious. They are ongoing. We've already intercepted one of them, a Pakistani national that was literally arrested the day before the July 13th shooting, putting down payment on hitmen. And my point, Hugh, that I think is getting lost in the conversation is when you say nothing, when you do nothing in response to something like this, as Biden and Harris have done, which is not even a strongly worded speech towards Iran, much less consequences, you are essentially making it open season on our political candidates. Imagine if Russia had ongoing assassination plots with the FSB to take Harris out, and a Trump administration did nothing, said nothing about it. And then Russia hacked the Harris campaign and gave the contents to Trump. The mainstream media would be collectively losing their minds, demanding condemnation and demanding consequences. But right now we have radio silence, which sends the signal, I think, out to all of our adversaries that they can get away with this kind of thing. And that
radio
is
silence metaphorically.
You want to talk about election interference? That is literally the worst kind, to kill a leading nominee and candidate and former president.
I just want to emphasize, metaphorically. We talk about it all the time on the radio and on the Salem News Channel. Michael Waltz, I want to close by telling you about the fact that Tony Blinken blew you off. Now, he is the third in line in succession to the presidency. He's confirmed by the United States Senate. The Congress has oversight. They summoned him to talk about the collapse in Afghanistan, and he blew you off. What do you do when that happens?
Well, you do what we did yesterday. You formally vote him in contempt. I believe we will get that voted off the floor of the House. That gets referred to the Department of Justice. This Department of Justice under Garland will do nothing with it, but a future Department of Justice under a future Trump Attorney General may well decide to prosecute, as DOJ has done to Bannon and sent Navarro to jail for defying congressional subpoenas. So the Democrats unleashed that Pandora's box. But look, this is the worst military debacle since Saigon. I would say it was worse than Saigon because of the ongoing terrorism threat. We had a House investigation. We simply asked him to come spend a couple of hours to answer for the total inconsistencies and lies from him, Biden, and Jake Sullivan, as evidenced by their own people under sworn testimony, who contradicted a whole number of things that Blinken told us during that withdrawal. He blew us off. He didn't come. He said he's too busy up at the UN and didn't even offer a date until after the election. The Democrats are saying this is political. Well, you know what's also political? Doing nothing, inaction, and saying, I'll come talk to you after the election. The election is accountability. He didn't blow us off, Hugh. He blew off the American people, the hundreds of thousands of veterans who served, our Afghan allies who are being tortured, and those 13 Gold Star families who are still looking for answers.
You know, Congressman, we'll conclude with this. I think he is going to avoid being under oath because his childhood friend, Rob Malloy, is under investigation, has had his Security Council clearance, his national security clearance, suspended, and is an embarrassment, and he's Tony Blinken's buddy, and it looks like he's very close to the Iranians. Has that come across your desk at the Intel Committee or Armed Services? What's going on with our Iranian compromise?
They've completely stonewalled. They've had Malley under investigation for over a year. How hard is it to figure out, which some journalists figured out when they dumped his emails, that he was regularly talking to the Iranian Foreign Ministry, checking in with them before and after he gave classified briefings to Congress, and had classified material on his personal computer. So I think he's embarrassed about that, Hugh, but I think he's more embarrassed about the Afghanistan debacle, and for political reasons doesn't want it on the headlines right now, because the Biden administration, with Harris as the last in the room, never recovered. Their polling tanked when the world saw that debacle and that incompetence, and it's never recovered since. And the last thing Blinken wants is to be talking about it and answering questions and inconsistencies, like the 100 Americans that got revised to 800 Americans left behind, like that our NATO allies were all on board when they absolutely were not. I mean, I could go down the list of lies, that Al Qaeda was gone when they're very much back. And he doesn't want to be talking about that in September, October. And so for political reasons, he said no, and we're holding him in contempt.
Good, because the statute of limitations on that is a year. And so a Trump Department of Justice can call him in and decide whether or not to charge him. Olivia Beavers covers Congress for Politico. She joins me now. Olivia, there's so much going on in the world in the presidential campaign. I don't know that many Americans know what the situation is on funding the government. Can you break it down for us? Where are we? What's going to happen?
So at the moment, it looks like the government is set to be funded until December 20th. So Speaker Johnson's original plan did not succeed, where he planned to include the SAVE Act. And that was legislation that would require proof of citizenship to vote in federal elections. And about 14 Republicans opposed it. Some are never CRs, which is a continuing resolution, or another word for a short-term funding bill. And others just opposed it for reasons that they would not publicly state. But so that tanked, and now it looks like Democrats and Johnson and some of his allies are going to be able to pass it basically with the same funding levels, a clean CR, and with basically some anomalies, but it will be until December 20th. And that, so basically the fight is just punted. But it will be in a different situation. We'll know who the president is. We'll know which parties have power in the Senate and the House. And, there's already kind of concerns within the Republican Party that there might be what they call an omnibus, where they just package it all together and rank and file members don't have a ton of say what goes into that bill. But Johnson has argued that that will not be the case. So we're going to see how that has to play out.
Olivia, I'm glad about this. I am happy with this because if the Republicans take the Senate and retain the House, they can simply shut down the government from December 21st until January 5, and then fund it for Joe Biden to sign and wait for them. Because the new Congress arrives on January 5, not January 20, and they could then go to an omnibus, which is actually serious about defense. Has that occurred to anyone? I'm just very glad with the short-term CR, because I don't want these people.
It hasn't. I think like a major component, which during a closed-door meeting, Johnson had polling up, and he was arguing that independents as a whole, ticket splitters and independent men and women, all those voter categories opposed shutdowns in sort of like the 60% range to 20% who favored it. And so his argument was, it would be really bad for us right before the election to have a shutdown where we could be put, blamed by voters and have this impact us. So I think them punting it closer to December is better. And I know that defense hawks think that this is a better plan also for the Pentagon. But one of the other sort of considerations is it also is a lot closer to the leadership elections. And I know reporters sometimes get knocked for palace intrigue, but it is important to know how people sort of plot and plan being in leadership next year. And this also could become, something that could hamper Mike Johnson if he doesn't handle it in the way that the right flank wants him to.
That is very possible, and it will affect Thune Cornyn, the two people trying to succeed Mitch McConnell, not replace, because Leader McConnell's stepping down and retiring from the leadership role, not from the Senate. But I do want people to understand that it is always bad politics to shut down the government for about a month. And then everyone forgets. And I remind them in 2009, the government shut down for a long time and the Republicans won everything in 2010. Because voters just don't remember, Olivia, a shutdown from the year before come the next election. So a shutdown from December 20th to January 5th has zero political effect. And I'll fight on that hill all day. Do you disagree with me?
No, I think also people have a lot of, short-term memories because so much can happen in a year. And I too will forget about those things. And so I think that's fair. They'll be voting about like way more present matters that are higher up on their priority list than something that might have happened way back when.
All right, the 2009 shutdown, which is way before your time, Olivia, it had Republicans wringing their hands and, we're going to get crushed. And nobody even cared in 2010. It was over by, 1 year. It doesn't last that long.
Yeah, you just have to be careful about like immediate repercussions about it. But Hugh, there is one other thing I don't know if you've, I was listening to your show earlier this morning, and I don't know if you've had a chance to talk about it at all, but there was a bipartisan report from the Senate Homeland Committee about the Donald Trump assassination attempt. And my colleague was the one who read through the 134 pages, but there was really sort of pretty illuminating stuff where you had members of Congress basically calling it a perfect storm of stunning failure. It's a bipartisan report, and they say that all of these failures were preventable, but there was one part that just kind of took my breath away a little bit. And I wanted to read it to you if that's okay.
Please, we got like 30 seconds.
Sure. A Secret Service counter sniper told the committee that they saw local law enforcement running towards the building where the shooter was located with their guns drawn, and that it, quote, did not cross his mind to alert Trump's protective detail to get him off the stage. So they're making a series of recommendations about how to improve Secret Service moving forward.
Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I'll go read the story at Politico. Joined by Tim Sheehy, who is going to be the next senator from Montana. Good morning, Tim. Good to have you on the program. Welcome back.
Thanks, Hugh. How you doing?
I am great. I did not know until this morning, when I actually went to your website and read your bio, that your wife is a Naval Academy grad too, and she's a Marine. That's all I need to know to support you. You got a Marine wife. Did you guys meet at the academy, or did you meet after the academy?
No, we met there. It's not common to go to the academy to find romance, but that's what I did.
No.
And we met there, and it worked out.
Now, you have 4 children. I am curious what they think about the prospect of leaving beautiful Montana for the Beltway.
Well, I mean, we're definitely not going to take the kids out there. I mean, we live in Montana for a reason, so I'll be doing a lot of commuting back and forth, and we do homeschool them, so there'll be some times we can bring them with, if I got to be out there for an extended period. In fact, I just brought my daughter out a couple weeks ago. We were there for some meetings, and she got to see the monuments for the first time, but we're definitely not going to uproot our family from Montana. This is home.
Good plan. Now, Tim Sheehy, update us on the race against John Tester. I look at the polls, it looks good, but I don't like to rest on leads. I doubt SEALs like to rest on leads either.
No, I mean, we got to keep the boot on the neck all the way to the finish line. We are not going to let up, not only because funding, I mean, we're going to be outspent. We have been outspent. We'll continue to be outspent. But they will say and do anything here in these last 40 days to win this election. They've already shown in this race, they've rolled out such a disgusting smear campaign against me and my businesses, even the charities I donate to. They have no rules. They really don't. And they don't care who they hurt and what they damage. And I know in this last month, they will pull all the stops out. They'll dump $100 million into the state. They'll do whatever it takes. So we've got to keep the pressure on. We've had polls show us up 6, 8, 4, 2, you name it. But generally, we're showing a steady lead. But we got to keep the pressure on to the finish line. We can't let up, and we won't.
Small dollar donors matter, even when the total being spent is enormous. It matters because it's one more touch. How big is the electorate, Tim Sheehy, in Montana? I know North Dakota pretty well. I don't know Montana's size of voters.
We have about 1 million people in the state, roughly 575,000 turnout. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less in a year like this, hopefully a little more, because turnout helps us here in Montana. But it's important for all Americans to remember this is not just a Montana Senate election. This election determines control of the Senate for about a decade. and even longer if you consider Chuck Schumer and Kamala Harris's plan to end the filibuster, add 2 more states, and pack the court. This race will determine whether the Senate remains the American institution of the U.S. Senate that we've come to know, or whether this turns into a progressive rubber stamp that will permanently alter our republic. So Americans in all states need to understand this race is critical for the future of our constitutional republic, and they should consider supporting us, especially if you're in a deep blue state or a deep red state where maybe your elections are pretty well baked. Help us out here in Montana. $5, $10 would go a long way because we're going to get outspent in these last 30 days. We got to hold the lead that we have. We can't give them an inch.
Can you give the website address, Tim Sheehy?
Tim4mt.com. Timformt.com.
It is the easiest website in America, timformt.com. Go and help out. Now, I want to ask you, former President Trump gave a speech on farming 2 days ago. There are farmers, but there are ranchers. They're very different. Does the ranching community have a dog in this fight?
I mean, across the board, American ag has been hurting. Input costs, inflation has hammered American ag. Input costs have soared here these last 3.5 years. Diesel exhaust fluid, DEF systems have been very harmful to our farmers because they're reducing the useful engine life on the tractors and adding yet another input cost they have to carry. Of course, foreign products coming in, increasing competition in a marketplace where our input costs are being harmed. So, yes, all of American ag is hurting right now. It's about time, we put our farmers and ranchers first. It's about time we pass a farm bill, and we haven't passed a farm bill since 2018. So some common sense policies that come from, free market principles that support our farmers and ranchers. We have a lot of folks that are tapping their foot waiting for some actual congressional action to support our ag community.
And I also want to talk about aggregate extraction and fracking. Montana is not North Dakota. North Dakota's got more fracking ability than anybody. I talked to Doug Burgum about it. But does aggregates extraction and fracking matter in Montana? Because Kamala Harris is opposed to both.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, Montana's the largest piece of our economy was mining. Of course, the largest copper mine in the world was in Butte, Montana. We do have fracking just across the border from North Dakota, up in the Bakken area. So we do have some of that comes into Montana. We absolutely need to unleash American energy. We need to bring common sense mining practices back too. I mean, we have eviscerated the mining industry in America. We need lithium, we need copper, we need cobalt, we need aluminum. We need all these precious minerals to support our defense industrial base, to make the iPhones we all put in our pockets, to make the cars we need. And the reality is we've pushed mining out of this country to other countries. We need to bring it back. Fracking and any form of energy extraction should be prioritized under any administration because we got to bring gas prices down. We've got to have energy dominance, not just energy security. And luckily, that's what President Trump is championing. My opponent, John Tester, has rubber stamped the Biden-Harris now Waltz agenda every step of the way, which, as you well know, has been a war on fossil fuels since the beginning. So we're going to unleash American energy. That matters hugely here in Montana. If you recall, the Keystone XL pipeline would have gone right through Montana, would have been a tremendous economic boon for the state. It also would have been a great additional piece of our energy security nationally. John Tester and, of course, the Democrats worked together to kill that project. That was an important Montana project. And finally, and most importantly, if we're talking about mining and fossil fuels in Montana, is Colstrip. We have one of the best coal deposits in the region down in Colstrip, Montana. It provides cheap, reliable baseload power to our entire state, our entire economy, and we need that power plant to be open. And every day, the EPA is tightening the noose around its neck. One little rule change at a time, and they're trying to put Colstrip out of business. We need to unleash Colstrip because the entire region depends on the power it provides.
I'm glad you brought that up, Tim. I was going to talk to you about the SHIPS Act, but let's stay focused on this. Because I had a long conversation with Doug Burgum about this. We can capture carbon. It is possible to not emit carbon from coal emissions. Does John Tester understand that? Will he stand up outside of that coal plant and say, this has got to be left alone, this has got to expand, because energy is freedom, and we've got to have an AI industry and a supercomputer industry. That means doubling and tripling our baseload electricity production. It's an easy yes.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, the future is only going to require more power, not less. And while we're actively hamstringing our own energy industry, we are actively shutting down whether it's nuclear, whether it's coal, we are shutting down America's power industry at a time when we need it more than ever. And folks like John Tester. Now, John Tester, like you said, probably would stand in front of Colstrip and say, keep this open. Then he'd fly back to D.C. and vote to close it, because that's Two-Face Tester's routine. As he comes to Montana, puts on, throws his gun over his shoulder, walks around like a border security, gun-toting, Bible-thumping Republican, and then goes to D.C. and votes party line every single time with Biden and Harris. Voted to impeach Trump twice. Every piece of legislation that came out of the administration, he supported. But the fact is, he has been an enemy of Colstrip, as has the Democrat Party nationally. And it's so important to that town. That town depends on that plant, and the entire state's economy depends on the cheap power coming from that plant.
Tim4MT.com. Go and help him out. Keep coming back, Tim Sheehy. 40 days to go. I know you're working hard. I would assume nothing less from a SEAL and Annapolis grad and the Marine that you were married to. Probably have the Sheehy kids out there knocking on doors, too. That's good. It's good to learn about American politics. Tim4MT.com. Thank you, Tim Sheehy. Talk to you when you're Senator-elect Sheehy and before. Coming up after the break, Ted Cruz joins me. I do want to play a couple of excerpts from the Savannah speech that Congressman Michael Waltz mentioned yesterday. Donald Trump in Savannah. Here's what he said about our industrial base, cut number 46.
This new American industrialism will create millions and millions of jobs, massively raise wages for American workers, and make the United States into a manufacturing powerhouse like it used to be many years ago. We will be able to build ships again. We will be able to build airplanes at a much higher level again. We will become the world leader in robotics and every other field. The U.S. auto industry, which has been decimated over many, many decades, will once again be the envy of the planet.
Okay, just repeat that again and again. The SHIPS Act. Just add in the SHIPS Act. I think Congressman Waltz is right. That is great. You can follow Michael Waltz at Michael G. Waltz, W-A-L-T-Z, if you want. Coming up after the break, Ted Cruz. Dr. Jill Biden gave a speech at the Clinton Global Initiative. I just cannot not play this for you. Cut number 54.
The reason I'm so glad that you invited me here today is this big announcement. So the Department of Defense has now committed $500 billion to women's health, to women in the service, which then transcends to all women. Mm-hmm. And so I'm so excited about that. It's a big deal, and it's about time. So we're going to get moving on this.
I'm speechless. I just talked to Michael Waltz. I just talked to other people about the fact that the USNS Bighorn, an oiler, has run aground or had an accident, and it cannot provide fuel to the Lincoln Carrier Strike Group in replenishment supplies. We do not have another USNS oiler to send, so we are desperately looking around for a commercial oiler, and they're going to have to retrofit in real time the Lincoln and other ships to accept oil from commercial oilers. We don't have ships. We are out of ships. We don't have enough oilers to have redundancy. Two is one and one is none. That's an old SEAL saying. If Tim Sheehy had been here, he would have told you 2 is 1 and 1 is none. And so we have none now. We don't have an oiler. The USNS Bighorn out of commission. So Jill Biden announces that the Department of Defense is taking $500 million away from the Department of Defense to spend on women's health. I am glad that our federal government has money to spend on women's health. I don't know if that means abortion. I don't know what it means, but I'm glad that they can actually, if it's actually about health and not about abortion, I would applaud that. If it were any other department, not the Department of Defense, we are now below 3% GDP for the Department of Defense. During World War II, we were at 25% of GDP went to the war. Now we are at below 3%. It is astonishing. It is without parallel and precedent that we are not spending 3% of GDP on the Department of Defense. And I'm joined now by Senator Ted Cruz. Senator Cruz, welcome. I want to talk about defense, but first I want to talk about your race. every 6 years, Democrats in Texas try and fool people, and they do the same thing. They nominate a far leftist to run against you. Is it working this time?
Well, it is dangerous. I'll tell you, they're putting a massive amount of money behind it. You'll remember 6 years ago, my last reelect was, at the time, it was the most expensive Senate race in U.S. history. And they outspent me 3-1. And they ended up almost winning. I barely won. I won by less than 3 points. I won by 2.6%. And so this time around, Chuck Schumer has been explicit that I'm his number one target in the country. And they are coming after me. They are spending a mountain of money. The candidate, as you noted, is hard left, and he's doing exactly what Kamala Harris is doing. He's hiding in the basement. He's not doing media interviews. He's not doing press conferences. But they're going to spend between $100 million and $150 million trying to beat me. And we've had multiple polls that show this as a 1 and 2 and 3 point race. So it is a very real fight.
TedCruz.org is where you go to help Senator Cruz. TedCruz.org. I know you might love to listen to his podcast, The Verdict, but I want you to go to TedCruz.org and send him a little bit of money, because when this dark money machine operates, it can really overwhelm you, especially on Spanish language radio. Are you up on Spanish language radio, Ted Cruz?
We are. We've got a $4.5 million campaign that is focused just on the Hispanic community. And it's a massive investment. And listen, I think we have an opportunity with Hispanic voters in Texas to make historic inroads. But the problem is, this election, we've been outspent. So my opponent, Colin Allred, has been on TV statewide for 3 months. I just went on TV 2 weeks ago. So for 3 months, it's been entirely one-sided. And it's not that I didn't want to be up on air in June. It's that we didn't have the money. And that is the danger. You've got Chuck Schumer, you've got George Soros just flooding cash into the state. And so I got to say, I appreciate your listeners. I appreciate their help. I appreciate they're going to tedcruz.org. If you can give $10 or 25 or 50 or 100 or even more, I mean, we are less than 6 weeks out, and it is a full court press. They are coming after me relentlessly. And Schumer sees this as the one way that he has a prayer of holding on to a Democrat majority. You look at the map right now, the Democrats have a 51-49 majority in the Senate. Republicans are going to win West Virginia. They've essentially conceded West Virginia. That takes us to 50-50. Right now, we're leading by a sizable margin in Montana. That takes us to 51-49. That would give us a Republican majority. Schumer's looking at those very same polls. And the only path he has to try to turn that around is to come after Texas. And his view is, look, all he needs is 3 points. 3 points would have beat me last time. He needs 3 more points, and that's why they're investing so much money. It's why I need the help of your listeners to go to tedcruz.org and help us out right now, because if we can't communicate, we lose.
Senator, oddly enough, they keep nominating leftists to run against you. And that is what, in the end, I think will allow you to get another victory. He supports boys playing girls' sports in high school. It, to me, is a 90-10 issue against that. Will he talk about that?
He doesn't talk about anything. He literally, in the last 7 weeks, he's done one press conference. In the last 7 weeks, I've done 20 press conferences. And the reason for that is his record. His first 4 years in the House, he voted 100% with Nancy Pelosi. He doesn't want to talk about that. So you're right. He voted for boys playing against girls in sports. He voted for allowing boys in girls' bathrooms. He voted for allowing boys in girls' locker rooms and changing rooms. You look at his record on the border. He's voted repeatedly for open borders. He's voted against the wall, not once, not twice, 3 separate times he voted against the wall. If you believe, as you and I both do, that border security is important, Colin Allred says you're a racist. He refers to the wall as, quote, that racist border wall, and he has pledged to personally tear down, quote, that racist border wall. Right now, Hugh, he's spending millions of dollars with TV ads with him standing in front of what he calls that racist border wall. It's fundamentally deceptive. It's the same thing Kamala's doing. but it's what happens when you got $100 million to spend.
And when you do not have an independent media. Texas's media is just broken. Let me close with this, Senator Cruz. I know you're doing back-to-back media interviews this morning. You are a staunch friend of Israel. There is a not insignificant community of Jewish Americans in Texas and, of course, a huge community of supporters of the state of Israel. You are a strong supporter of the state of Israel. I don't think that the people of Texas know. Colin Alred isn't, and the Democratic Party isn't. They are appeasers. They are surrender monkeys. Do people know that about Colin Alred?
They don't, and Allred's record, as I said, is hard left. It's been 100% with Nancy Pelosi. He's voted repeatedly against Israel. He is supported by J Street, the radical far-left group. In fact, J Street has named him one of their superstars. They're flooding cash into his campaign. He voted just recently against a bill to force the Biden White House to give weapons to Israel. Colin Allred voted no. He invited and celebrated a radical imam into D.C., an imam who is a vicious anti-Semite who has celebrated October 7th. Colin Allred called him the very best of North Texas. And I got to tell you, you look at the anti-Semitic protests on college campuses. They are funded by George Soros and the Rockefeller Brothers Fund and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Pritzker family. That same group has given Allred $80,000. He is funded by the same people funding the anti-Semitic protests. On the other side, I have spent 12 years as the leading defender of Israel in the United States Senate, and this is a clear distinction in the race, and it's why I need folks to go to tedcruz.org and support me, because the money on the other side is dangerous. We had a poll last week that showed me losing the race, down 1 point to Allred. That's how dangerous this is, so I need your help at tedcruz.org.
And, Senator, when does voting begin in Texas?
Voting begins October 21st, or 2 weeks before November 5th.
So to make an impact on this race, you got to act today. Head over to tedcruz.org. Help out the senator. Israel needs him. We need him. And Texas needs him. tedcruz.org. Thank you, Senator. I know you're jammed. I appreciate the time this morning. Come back before the election.
Thank you, Hugh. God bless.
You too. I got to tell you, Ted Cruz is the equal of any intellect in the Senate. We got a lot of smart people in the Senate. A lot of smart people in the Senate. Shelley Moore Capito, West Virginia, very, very smart. Tom Cotton, very, very smart. Josh Hawley, very, very smart. The only one who's argued repeatedly before the United States Supreme Court is Ted Cruz. And that's because, I don't know, we just did in 5 minutes. We covered it. tedcruz.org, tedcruz.org, tedcruz.org. He knows. He needs your $25, your $50, your $100 every 6 years. This is the third time they have done this. They ran Beto against him 6 years ago, and he barely beat Beto, who was a pop star. Now they're trying the opposite approach, which is to hide and hope. Hiding and hope won't help because he's a lefty. Colin Alred is a lefty. And Ted Cruz is a staunch center-right Republican who stands for border security, the state of Israel, your right to defend yourself, your right to bear arms, your right to produce oil and gas, and you cannot go wrong by contributing to Ted Cruz. I didn't get a chance to talk to him. It's such an expensive state. I'm on in San Antonio. I'm on in Dallas. I'm talking to you right now in Houston. By the way, the Astros do not get the first round bye. That goes to the Guardians, so thank you very much. And I still will root for the Astros to get in and beat the Yankees so that the Guardians play somebody not named the Yankees. I'd rather play the Astros than the Yankees. So I'm not anti-Texas at all. I'm pro-Ted Cruz. I'm pro-Texas. I just want you to know they're running a radical against him. They are putting radical money behind him. And you need to get out there, whether you're listening to me in Beaumont, Texas, or San Antonio, or up north in the Panhandle. I'm on in Amarillo. I'm on all over the Lone Star State, and I'm here to tell you, vote early and contribute. Joined by phone by Vivek Ramaswamy. I have two big surprises. Welcome back, Vivek. It's great to have you back.
Good to be on, Hugh. How are you?
I'm great, but I have two big surprises. Number one, your brand new book, Truths, which I'm holding up, is the #1 bestseller in the country as ranked at Amazon. So congratulations. Number two, the Bengals are 0-3. I wanted to make sure we put that in there.
Well,
are you a season ticket holder for the
start.
Bengals?
I used to be a regular. I live in Columbus now, so I go to Ohio State football games more frequently, where we have more success.
No, absolutely. Urban Meyer was on the program yesterday. So, yeah, that's a better bet. But I just know you're a Bengals fan, so I want to. Did you expect to be number one at Amazon, Vivek?
I did not. No, I'm really pleased. I've written 4 books. I've never hit number 1 before, so that was nice to have a first this time. I do think it's my most important of the 4 books I've written, Hugh, is that we need to actually practically inform people, not just as academic exposition, but to actually inform them with the arguments they're able to make at the dinner table with friends on the other side. And that's what I'm trying to do through this book, is unite the country by giving people the ability to do what I did during the campaign in reaching and persuading people who may not agree with us to at least open up and have a conversation. And that's what I hope we do with this book.
I've read it. I read it over the weekend. I got the pre-publication edition. And The Future of America First is the subtitle, which interests me a lot. I want to begin with something that's not in the book, however, because I saw you engage, you and Tucker were out somewhere doing an event, and I saw you engage purposefully and productively with a rather clueless college kid. And I thought to myself, okay, let's make sure we ask Vivek what his advice for J.D. Vance is in the upcoming debate next week with Tim Walz, because it's 3-on-1 again. Margaret Brennan doesn't like J.D. Vance. Nora O'Donnell doesn't like J.D. Vance. It's just like the ABC debate. It's going to be 3 against 1. What do you think J.D. Vance ought to do and the tactics he ought to approach?
Well, look, actually, in a weird way, it does relate to the book. It does relate to also my experience in going to these college campuses. One of the things I've found, Hugh, is that when we are amenable and respectful in our style, that actually gives us the latitude to be uncompromising on principle and policy. So my best advice would be, don't apologize for your views when they try to get you to soften what your actual policies are. Don't change the policies, but change, I think, one of the things we're able to do is to change the pace of what the moderators might set, even if they're coming hard at you, to be able to demonstrate that, you know what, we're not fazed by that, but actually we look at you as fellow Americans who are in this to lead. And I think the more we do that, the more successful we're going to be. And the irony is, no, we're not going to be more successful in winning the election. We're going to be even more successful in building the consensus needed to pass the policy agenda without actually compromising on it or softening it around the edges.
You know, it was with Charlie Kirk. That's who you were with. And Charlie's in the book. In fact, I want to bring up page 83 of Truths. And you know that you got to say the title of a book 7 times for anyone to remember it. Truths by Vivek Ramaswamy. Charlie told you to stop using the term administrative state. I got to send a note to Charlie. He's wrong. Keep using and explaining that, because we don't have a deep state in terms of police knocking on doors in the middle of the night like Turkey and Russia and China. But we've got a permanent government, an administrative state. And you're one of the few people who talk about how that is, in fact, a first issue that Donald Trump has to take on in term 2.
That's right. I think it is the core issue for how we save our republic and also stimulate our economy. So the dirty little secret, and not a lot of people know this, Hugh, is that most laws are really written in the form of what they call rules, which never went through Congress, but still have the binding effect of law on everyday Americans. They were written by 3-letter agency bureaucrats who were never elected to their positions in the first place. The SEC, the FTC, the FBA, the EPA, the God knows what, the alphabet soup in Washington, D.C. I think this is the single most important chapter in the book. It's a chapter entitled, There Are 3 Branches of Government, Not 4. And that might sound dry to some people, but it actually goes to the heart of why we fought the American Revolution, to say that we believe in self-governance, that the people we elect to run the government should be the ones who actually run the government. And in that chapter of the book, I explained this hopefully in a way that actually brings this issue to life and shows how it actually affects everyday Americans in invisible ways that are sucking the lifeblood out of our economy, but also the lifeblood out of our constitutional republic. I think it's the most important chapter of the book, actually, and I hope people, if you read one chapter coming out of this, read the chapter on the administrative state. The book tells truths in a lot of different directions, but the hard truth we tell is the myth that the people we elect to run the government, who run the government, they're not the ones actually pulling the strings.
Vivek Ramaswamy talking about his brand new bestseller, Truths. And it is #1 at Amazon, as I pointed out on the show today. Vivek, I read it all. I read Facts Aren't Conspiracy, The Nuclear Family is the Greatest Form of Governance Known to Mankind. It's all right. I want to talk about this chapter, Reverse Racism and Racism. And I want to do it because you and I are both Harvard grads. I went to Harvard Yard this summer with my grandkids, 10 and 12. And we were standing in front of my freshman dorm in the yard when I was approached by a proctor to tell, you can't go in there, you can't go. I said, don't worry, I lived there 50 years ago, and they were kind of stunned that anyone that ancient would be back there. But then we had a conversation, and she was a wonderful, nice lady. She's from Guadalajara, Mexico. I'm not opposed to international students being there. I am opposed, however, to the use of race in admissions. Do you think Harvard is conforming to the Constitution's mandate that we be colorblind and that it is okay to prefer Americans over people not from America?
I think they're quite obviously not. Certainly over the last several years, this is part of what was decided at the Supreme Court. The best way to end discrimination on the basis of race is to stop discriminating on the basis of race, which is exactly what John Roberts of the Supreme Court said.
Direct quote.
One of the things yes, exactly. I think his exact quote was the way to stop discrimination on the basis of race is to stop discriminating on the basis of race. Now, one of the things that happened at Harvard, and I see this firsthand afterwards, is it's not just anti-white and anti-Asian racism. That's what it is on the face of it. But it is also spawning a new wave of anti-black racism across the country. That goes underappreciated. That's one of the things I actually talk about in this chapter in the book, is it's an uncomfortable truth that even the rise in anti-black racism is in part a reactionary response to taking something else away from someone else on the basis of their skin color. And there is no better way, Hugh, to create racial animus in this country than to deny something someone of value based on their race. That's exactly what's happened, which ironically in the year 2024, and people may not expect to hear this from a conservative, I'm a conservative, but I make that point in this book, is we are seeing an uptick in anti-black and Hispanic racism, which I think is a direct response, a reactionary response, a predictable response to the failed affirmative action policies of the last 20 years, and especially the anti-racist woke policies of the last 4 years. So that's
and here's where I want to conclude, because Truths was written during the period of anti-Semitic explosion on the campus. What should Donald Trump instruct his Department of Education Office of Civil Rights and Division of Civil Rights at the Department of Justice to do? Because we do value the First Amendment. I don't care if people are crazy and anti-Semitic. I do care, but they have the right to be crazy and anti-Semitic and march around with signs. They do not have the right to assault people. And Education Department has an Office of Civil Rights to shut down colleges when they encourage or permit such abuse of their Jewish population. Vivek Ramaswamy, what ought to happen at our alma mater if it happens again?
So this is actually such an interesting subject, Hugh, because you and I are both free speech absolutists. All opinions get to be expressed legally.
Correct.
But as I say in the book, just because you have the right to say it does not make it right to say. And I think we have to draw that distinction. The final chapter of the book hits on this directly. I talk about those college campus protests, some of the riots, some of the violence, including that you saw in places like Columbia, obstructing entry into buildings. What are we to do with that? And the case I make in the book is we have to revive the constitutional culture. It's not just the rights that were given by the Constitution, or at least codified by the Constitution, but it's a constitutional culture that created that document in the first place. As John Adams said, our Constitution was made for a moral people. And so that's not going to be morality legislated by the government, but it's going to be a virtue that we revive that I think we've lacked in this country for a long time. And so what's the right answer for government to play here? You need local law enforcement to be able to say that you're free to express your opinion, fine, but you're not free to stop somebody else from entering a classroom and enforce the actual law. What do we do with the Department of Education? Well, this goes back to that chapter on the administrative state.
Yeah.
I think the right answer for Donald Trump is shut it down and then return that money to the states and the people so that people are actually empowered to choose where they send their kids to school. These are among the kind of truths that we explore over the course of this book, and I hope people are armed that they can make the arguments not just to you and I who agree with them, but hopefully to their friends and even family members and their kids who may lean left to help bring them along as well, which is why I was intent on putting this book out before the election.
Well, well done. Keep going to the college campuses, Vivek, and keep coming back. Always a pleasure to talk to you. The brand new book is Truth by Vivek Ramaswamy. It's in bookstores now. And at this hour, it is #1 at Amazon.com, which is quite an achievement. Thank you, Vivek. Look forward to having you back.
Thank you, Hugh.